Hello, everybody. Welcome to the lecture about the Spanish conquest of the Aztecs. This will set the stage for European conquest and interest in the Americas, for the amount of gold the Spanish pulled out of Mexico and then Peru, and in the ways in which the Spanish did it. The methods are going to be copied and tried, and this is going to set off a gold rush throughout Europe and even later on the rest of the world. So here it is. This is again a shorter version of my lecture. If you want much more about the Spanish conquest and the Aztecs, take my History 35 class in the spring. So in 1519, this second son from Extremadura, Spain, dropped out of college. He found it boring. He was going to be a lawyer. And he went where many other second sons who were not in line to get an inheritance in Spain went. He went to the promised land of the Americas in order to improve his life, gain gold, and gain glory. God, gold, and glory are often cited as the three main motivators of Spaniards and Europeans going to the Americas: God, gold, and glory. I'm also going to add in the next few lectures the incentive of also girls: God, gold, glory, and girls, because many of these were single men going and had dreams of going native, and many of them indeed did. So Hernan Cortez goes off to the Caribbean in 1509. He spends 10 years there, really wants to go and find this fabled Mexico, in which many of the other natives in the Caribbean are saying, yeah, that's where the money is, that's where the biggest, wealthiest civilization is. So illegally in 1519, he did not get permission from the governor of Cuba, the guy in charge of the whole Spanish expedition in the Caribbean. He didn't get permission. He wanted to make it on his own. He didn't want to have to compete with Governor Velasquez of Cuba if he did find any riches. So he and about 500 other Spanish soldiers, mostly Spaniards, went on his expedition to go inland, to go find this fabled Mexico and this Aztec empire. I always think it's interesting to look at what they bring, because this gives you an idea of what their intentions are. 11 ships, 100 sailors to take care of the ships, 14 cannon, horses. 16 horses was able to subdue a whole Aztec empire. It's quite something, and I'll show you why in a bit. 4 falconets, those are guns that move around, just the latest guns, kind of like small cannons. And they brought with them the European dogs of war, in this case greyhounds, canary, and English mastiffs, who have been bred to hunt people. So they start in the southern part of Cuba, Santiago de Cuba, and the line shows you their entrance into Mexico City, Tenochtitlan. The other part of the line that ends down south in Trujillo, you need not worry about. I'm just giving you a little idea about on the map where they went. So they left Cuba, right, went and hugged the coast of the Yucatan, and then resupplied, like many Spanish ships had done in this eastern part of the Yucatan. So the Spanish arrive, and they meet with the local Maya guy to get food and water and trade with them. But then they see this other Spanish guy who's a slave of the Maya. He turns out to be this guy Geronimo Aguilar, who was shipwrecked about 8 years previous, and now is a Maya slave. Well, Cortez says, man, this guy Geronimo Aguilar is going to be really helpful, because he knows many of the native ways, and he's bilingual now. He speaks Maya and Spanish. So Cortez and company buy Geronimo Aguilar from the Maya. They did not free him, right, by using force. They could not. So they buy him, negotiate with the local Maya leaders, and now Geronimo Aguilar's on board. However, Aguilar tells them a story about this guy, Gonzalo Guerrero, who had also suffered during the shipwreck of 1511. And however, he was not a slave. In fact, he had gone native and became a Maya chief. It's interesting. And after he became a Maya chief, he married a Maya woman, had a family, and lived in the interior of the Yucatan. So Cortez said, man, this guy's going to really be helpful, because he'll help us understand the natives better, and maybe knows their techniques and knows a bit about their diplomacy. So Cortez sends a messenger to go talk to Guerrero and tell him that, yes, we're going to finally free you from the savagery under which you've been living. Guerrero responds, Cortez. I hope you are well. I hope the king and queen is well and their family is well. But if you try to come and get me again, I will wage war on you and kill you all. Whoa, Guerrero went native, stayed native, and for the next 20 years fought off Spanish incursions into the Yucatan. We know this because about 1530 or so, 1540, he is found dead amongst one of the many skirmishes between the Maya people and the Spanish. So, on to the Mexican mainland and into the heart of the Aztec Empire. When the Spanish arrive at what's today Veracruz on the coast, Montezuma's people, this is an actual painting. This one, it was not an actual painting done by the Aztecs, and this one is. That's why it looks like well, judge it yourself. So Montezuma's people sight the Spanish, right? There's a little spy guy on top of the tree going, hey, there's the Spanish. So what Montezuma does is he sends some envoys over there to meet with the Spanish, give them gifts, which included gold, tobacco, chocolate, food, and girls. These were regular parts of diplomatic exchanges in order to get the desired end. It did not work. The Spanish did not leave. They just wanted more and more and more and more. One of the people gifted to Cortez was this young woman named Malintzin. She grew up speaking Nahua. Her mother, she was the eldest in the family. She grew up speaking Nahua, which is the language of the Aztecs. However, her mother sold her into slavery because Malintzin's younger brother and mother did not want her to inherit the family wealth. So sold her into slavery, and then that's when she was gifted to Cortez. Gifted to Cortez, the Spanish were often gifted women. They never said no thank you. That's not a very Christian thing to receive. They always welcomed them, as far as we know as historians. She was gifted to Cortez. She was baptized and renamed Doña Marina, which means like Sin Madam Marina. This would be the English equivalent. About 9 months later, she gave birth to Cortez's child, and symbolically, the first mestizo Mexican is born. Again, if you want to hear more about this, take my History 35 class. We go into her in detail. She actually does go back and see her family again, her brother and her mother, after the Spanish had conquered. So Cortez now, with Doña Marina at his side, she learns Spanish very quickly and becomes a very adept interpreter of Nahua cultures and Nahua language. Right? She's the intermediary between Cortez and the Aztecs, and by all accounts, she remained very loyal to the Spanish. And as they went inland towards the Aztec Empire, they offered them a deal. Right? Diplomacy, can we work with you against the Aztecs, or do we have to unleash our dogs? Right? Made them a deal they couldn't refuse. So as they go inland, you can tell this is one of the 6 Africans who were part of the conquest of the Spanish. This guy here is Stephen. It was Cortez's personal servant. So the Spanish come in, and as you see, he's offering to make a diplomatic deal with local non-Aztec Mexicans in order to go and kick the Aztecs' butt. The biggest ally Cortez and the Spaniards make is with the Tlaxcalans, a people who live just east of Mexico City. And the Tlaxcalans are the long-hated enemy of the Aztecs. So the Tlaxcalan leadership agrees. They said, hey, these few hundred bearded men who come from Europe, they're not a threat to us. In fact, they might even help us defeat our enemies, the Spanish. So now the Spanish have tens of thousands of allies in the Tlaxcalans and march upon Tenochtitlan. As they get closer to Tenochtitlan, they arrive in Aztec-controlled Cholula, which is the same as that hot sauce you guys might use on your burritos. That's where they get the word. In 1519, while they were hosted and housed by Cholulans, many Spaniards were very nervous about, wow, they're just going to massacre us tonight. So whether the rumors were true or not, the Spanish did a preemptive attack on the Cholulans and killed everybody in the town, men, women, and children, and all about 10,000 Cholulans were killed. And this was a direct sign to people of central Mexico: do not mess with the Spanish and their Tlaxcalan allies, right? They mean business. And here's the image. In the image, you can clearly see that there's Spaniards with Doña Marina at their side, right? A native Mexican at their side. But they also have on their side Tlaxcalans who are fighting the pro-Aztec Cholulans. Many historians liken this to a civil war in which the Spanish are on one side of it. So 1519 rolls around. Well, they march towards Tenochtitlan. King Montezuma agrees to meet with Cortez, much to his brother's dismay. His brother said, let's wipe them all out now. King Montezuma said, there's nothing to worry about, little brother. There's only a couple hundred of them. I am the king of the most powerful empire in the world, he said. And he invited the Spanish in. The Tlaxcalans were not allowed in, only the Spanish. Not allowed in their city. And if you remember, the Aztec capital is on an island in the middle of a lake with limited access. So the Spanish enjoy a few weeks of Mexican hospitality. They're well fed, but it's a tense, nervous situation. The Spanish are constantly looking for ways to get gold or silver or any wealth. So the Aztecs aren't sure about what their true intentions are. And remember, the illegal part of Cortez going into the Aztec Empire and doing this expedition illegally. So Cortez leaves to go back to Cuba to tell his boss that, hey, everything's cool. I found the Aztecs. They're cool with me. He invited us in. Let's go in, and I need some reinforcements. However, when Cortez was gone, his second in command got nervous and massacred 80 to 85% of the elite at this ceremony that they do every spring with the comings of the rain. So the elite is decimated, the Aztec elite is decimated, yet they still vastly outnumber the Spanish and their Tlaxcalan allies. So the Aztec Empire strikes back, and they successfully oust the Spaniards for about a 6-month period. However, they don't oust everything the Spanish brought with them. Plagues, typhus, measles, influenza, bubonic plague, cholera, malaria, tuberculosis, this whole petri dish of European and Eurasian diseases that the Spanish brought with them, that the native Mexicans had no immunities to whatsoever, killed off many, many of the Mexicans. Of all Native Americans, about 95% of them died within a generation of contact with Europeans. In Mexico specifically, from July to February 1521, smallpox ravaged the countryside. About 5 to 8 million died. One of the largest mass deaths in human history happened at this time. So, how did the Spanish conquer the Aztecs? Well, right here. You have to look at disease as one of the number one agents of death and conquest. So this was part of the Columbian Exchange. I'm sure you guys are aware of this. It's this really dynamic exchange of goods and peoples and diseases and animals from Europe to the Americas and then back and forth. Look at the things that went back to Europe and Asia and Africa. Imagine Italian food with no tomatoes, right? Or Irish cuisine without potatoes. Imagine no polenta in Italy, which corn comes from. Imagine no peanuts in Africa. Peanuts are a vital source of nutrients in Africa. But then on the other side, imagine America without wine and grapes and bananas and sugar cane. Or, for that matter, imagine the Americas without cattle, sheep, pigs, or horses. These are livestock which were native to Eurasia that are coming to America for the first time, in addition to the disease. So in 1521, the Spanish and the Tlaxcalans conquer a much weakened city, a much weakened empire, and the Spanish set up their social system. Based on the medieval social system, the Spanish were going to ideally govern and pray for the souls of the colonial Spain. And the Indians were going to work, much like the peasants worked in medieval Europe. The reality, however, was a lot of mixing. The Spanish ideally wanted to keep Spanish and their offspring away from Indian and their offspring in order to have this ethnically based social hierarchy in which Spanish maintained power. However, that did not happen, right? People mix, people are going to amalgamate, they aren't going to follow this strictly top down, rigid system of this caste system. So the colonial social contract went something like this. The Spaniards, right, the conquistadors were awarded people and land, and they were to govern and protect them. These native Mexicans, Aztec, Nahua, Maya, what have you. And here, this image you see here symbolizes this. Here's a Spaniard, and he is awarded this town and those people. And if you were to read the Spanish writing in there, or to read the Aztec writing, right, you would know specifically what that meant. The one in the right up here, this is what the king's going to get, right? The king is good. This is the Spanish crown, so he is going to be awarded this. So the king gets a fifth. I'm sorry, here's the king one. I'm sorry, the other one's different. The king is going to get all the goods from this town right here. Okay, and the conquistadors get, this guy gets that town, that guy gets Coyoacan. Coyotl is coyote, so you can tell what that is. All right, and this is just an interesting reading of this new way that New Spain is going to be governed. The priest's job was to convert Indians to Christianity. All right, remember, there's no Protestants yet. This is the early 1500s. There's no such thing as Lutherans or Mormons or Calvinists or Anabaptists or anything like that. Most 99% of Christians are Catholics in Europe at this time, and their job was to convert what they saw as these folks who did not know Christianity, the Christian way of life. The Indians' job was to be loyal, offer their labor, pay tax, and in turn, hopefully, they would be protected and governed. And here's a look at the colonial landscape. You see indigenous villages, right, and churches in most every indigenous village to oversee the conversion and sort of the ethnic sort of redefining of who Indian people are. Now they're going to learn Spanish and learn Christianity. And literally, New Spain's capital was built right on top of the Aztec capital with the same stones, right? The same actual chunks of earth were redone and built into, for example, the Spanish cathedral. This thing took a couple hundred years to build, but you get the idea. Throughout the Mexican landscape, where there were pyramids, right? This is an ancient Mesoamerican pyramid. The Spanish would come and put a church right on top to literally show you where the power now lies, who you look up to. However, the Spanish wanted to make money out of this deal. Most of them invested their own money to come to the New World and conquer these new peoples. But the labor source was dying. Disease was killing off many Native Mexicans and Americans throughout the continent. So this is when this terrible transformation happened, in which European settlers, be they French, English, Spanish, turned to enslaved Africans for labor. And in Mexico, enslaved Africans worked at what would make New Spain a lot of money, make them the wealthiest, most powerful empire on earth. Since the Roman Empire, it was the silver boom of central Mexico and also in Peru. The silver boom accounted for, well, there was a time in the 1700s, early 1800s, in which Mexico produced, this one mine produced about a third of all the silver circulating in the world. This is what is going to cause El Dorado and the gold rush. It should really be called a silver rush. This is what really made Mexico and made all other European countries want to emulate Spain and what they did. You guys have probably seen this movie On the Road to El Dorado, seeing this gilded golden city. Well, the Spanish dream of empire and riches seems to have come true for many. And in the 15 and 1600s, Spain was the most powerful and wealthy kingdom in Europe, if not the world. A lot of it from these two silver mines. I have X's on, one in Mexico and one in South America. Here's King Philip II, right, getting his hat garnished by an angel, showing he is number one. And obviously, other countries, kingdoms, and Spaniards are going to want some of this. Queen Elizabeth, palm in the globe, wants some of this action. She wants to expand into the Americas. And you know who else wants some of this? Cabeza de Vaca, Soto, Coronado, De Soto, all these others you're going to read about in chapter 4. Okay, thank you very much. We'll see you next time.